A set of data items is normally distributed with a mean of 60 and a standard deviation of 8. Convert each data item to a z-score. Okay, so a z-score is what we use to standardize data. We collect lots of data, and every time we collect data, it has a different mean and a different standard deviation. So what we do in normal curve calculations is say, you know what, we're going to standardize things, and your mean is pretty much going to become 0. Okay? And one standard deviation becomes 1, 2 standard deviations becomes 2, and 3 standard deviations becomes 3. So we're kind of like standardizing our numbers. So the first thing I need here is my formula for a z-score. Okay? Which looks like this in symbols. Or you can look at it as your data minus the mean divided by your standard deviation. Okay? And our data point here is 72 minus a mean of 60 divided by a standard deviation of 8. 72 minus 60 is 12. 12 divided by 8 is 1.5. Okay, so 72 was standardized, and it has a z-score of 1.5. And what this means is that 72 is 1.5 standard deviations above the mean. Okay, let's do this one. All right, so again, I have my formula, data point minus mean divided by standard deviation. 44 minus 60 is negative 16 divided by 8, which is negative 2. So in this case, we converted 44 and we got a z-score that's negative. The negative indicates that this data value is below the mean. And sure enough, 44 is less than 60. And we know now that 44 is 2 standard deviations below the mean. Okay. And finally, let's calculate a z-score for 60. So 60 minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. Well, 60 minus 60 is 0 divided by 8, which is 0. And that's what I was talking about. 60 is the mean. So the standardized score for 60 is 0. And when you look at your normal curve, when we label it, the mean goes in the middle as 0. And we count in z-scores 1, 2, 3 standard deviations above, 1, 2, 3 below, and the ones below are negative. Okay? And that 0 corresponds to the mean, which is 60. The standard deviation of 1 would correspond to 68, and so on and so forth.